Okay, so it's now recording. Hopefully that works. But if it doesn't, I might do a similar thing tomorrow in the lecture.
Right.
Depends, or I might record it separately. But I'm recording this now anyway. So let's grab this rather lengthy named class. Now this is all based on my experience when I was a software engineer in industry. Right, so what I'm going to do is create a new class. And it's called, bear with me a second, let's get the name right. Right, generic API, blah, 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 blah. Right, let's go and grab the contents of that class and dump them in. So there are two very, very important concepts in object-oriented programming. And this kind of captures it all. Right, so all I've done is I've copied that into there and it's not happy with that. Why is it not happy with that? Where's the error? What is the error? It's complete.
Oh, there's a full stop. It's the line 26. The comma.
Well spotted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, so tidy that up. That's very, very well spotted. Right, okay, so in front of us, we have the generic API transport delegate. It's a couple of things worth noting. Why have I used such a stupidly long name? Why have I called it generic API transport delegate? Was there a reason for that? That's the first question. The second question is, that's massively complicated looking, right? I mean, it's got tons of stuff that you can do in there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to simulate two scenarios of how you might use this. You might realize that you create a minibus or a car or a taxi, and that taxi, you don't want the taxi class you create to have to redo all of this stuff here. And you want to basically take advantage of the fact you already have a class which does this all. So you have two mechanisms. And let your judgment help you work out which is the first way. So we're going to call this one, let's not generic API transport. Let's call this car. And we're going to call this car. Okay, we'll just call it car. Car or bicycle? No, car will do. Right, so I've got a class here called car. And in here, I really want to store, look at this. I mean, whenever you look at a class, look at what it's storing. I want to store the fuel and the fuel capacity. They're the only two values because it gives me here a get and a set method. Think about this in real life. When you ask the printer, for example, to do something, or you write an application, you have behind your code an API class, a class which will actually do all the work for you. And what your code does is it uses that stuff. So I don't want to rewrite any of this fuel. I don't want to spend time copying that out of this file, copying those two out of that file, copying the gets and sets and using them. But in my car, I'm only interested in these two pieces of information, the fuel and the fuel capacity. So I have certain options that I can do to help me do it. The easiest way to do this is actually turn this into an object. There's one way, it's called delegation, right? This is the delegate. It's called API delegate, doesn't matter. And what I do in my car is I create, oops, not that one. Let me go back, grab the name of the class and grab it in here. And I'm going to just give it a name. I think in the examples, I've called it GAPI, right? So what I've done here is I'm saying my car is not going to have its own member variables. I don't need them. It doesn't need get set methods. I don't need them. This generic API transport delegate class has it all that I need. I'm not going to use all of it, but I'm going to use the bits that I want.
Right.
Okay, so the first thing to do is I need a constructor, and I need for my car, I need its own get set methods. So now I'm going to kind of hack this, right, in many different ways. I'm going to cheat a bit. I'm going to grab this, right, because it's easier if I just demonstrate it. And you can see how quick it is to code this. But I don't want generic API transport. I want car. So actually, I'm not interested in passing in the organization, the transport ID, the customer's ID. I'm only interested in passing in those two and storing those two, right? So my car is only going to ask for fuel and fuel capacity. Let's just tidy it up. And this process might make you realize where the best way of doing all this is. There are only two pieces of information I want in my constructor. right? So what do I do with the organization? Well, what kind of data is it? Out of curiosity, is it a string? Yes, a string. Okay. So actually for that, I'm just going to leave an empty string. For the transport ID, I'm just going to leave it as 0 or null. Traveling customers, I'm not interested. I'm just going to do you see I'm hard coding these other values because they're irrelevant. Seats, irrelevant. So I'm going to put 0. What we do in real life is use nulls and we make these values optional. So it means that we don't ever interfere with them at all. Now this says this organization. So straight away, it looks like it's unhappy about something, right? Because it's saying, I don't know what this organization is. So what we have to actually do is we have to create an object out of this member variable inside here, right? And we're going to create a new one of these transport delegate classes, right? And I'm going to pass it 2 speech marks, a 0 for the customer's ID, the fuel, whatever you give me for the fuel, which is the parameter coming in, hang on, right, comma, fuel. The other value is the fuel capacity. So yes, we're gonna need that, right? So let's grab that. And we don't care about seats, right? So I was going to pass in 0. It's irrelevant, entirely irrelevant. So that's what it actually looks like. So now at this point, my constructor passes in 2 pieces of information, and my delegate class is the thing that's going to manage everything else. Now, there are all kinds of complications with this, and if some of them jump into your head, just ask, right? But have a look at that.
Right.
So at this stage, this car is what we call a wrapper, a very thin, light wrapper. So imagine an onion. Oh my goodness, I've got an amazing rainbow outside my window. So I in a cabin in a garden. Probably guess.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a rainbow as well a couple of days ago. It's a double rainbow.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, here I only need the fuel and the fuel capacity, right? I'm not interested in anything else. And this API class will do everything else for me. It'll do all the work. Imagine the API class has all kinds of calculations built into it, all kinds of other services and so on. This concept is very, very powerful. My class is not doing anything other than just using this other thing, this other system. So it's so from your point of view, it's like having a department in a business that itself just simply passes stuff to another department which does all the work.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So let's just add, because I want to set and get those values and have a couple of calculations. Let me just quickly grab a set and a get in there. Now this is just me. I'm going to need some of those, but we're going to have to tidy those up. And I need a couple of those, not those ones, those. Right. Oops. Let's go back here. Right. So let's just make these work. Let's get these gets and sets. So this one has a, the car now has a get fuel, but what it's going to do is it's not return this fuel, it's return GPA, the value that's being held in that fuel. What's wrong with that? What have I done? Oh, it's because that's capitalized. Sorry. Okay. Right.
Both of it has to be capitalized to P as well.
Yes, well spotted. In fact, I should just double click that, paste that into there, paste that into there, paste that into there, paste that into there, and the job is done. So I now have created a class called car, which doesn't require, if you look at the generic API transport class, there's an error in here somewhere. So let's have a look where the error is. We'll come back to that in a second. Fuel car has private access. Okay, so what, we'll come back to that in a second, right? I have to actually use its get set methods inside my get set methods. We'll come back to that in a second because you understand the concept here. But if I come to my main, right, and I create my car, I say new car, the only 2 pieces of info, and I keep mistyping everything, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just say I just have to pass it 2 pieces of information.
Yep.
I have a calculation or any other method, it's using the delegate class to look after everything. So it's like a thin layer, it's like an extra layer of an onion. At the center of my onion is this class here. Now, here, that member variable in API class is private. It's hidden. So I have to use its get set methods. So instead of get fuel, I have to grab that. instead of the fuel, I have to put that there because I have to say to the API class, give me your fuel, give me your fuel capacity, set the fuel. So you have here, instead of fuel equals that, you would have set fuel. And
this is because the member variables that are declared inside the GAPI class is private, right? That's why we have to do this.
And you don't want to change that. That's protected. That's a fundamental part of protecting your methods and classes you've built. And so you just use the get set methods. See, it's all happy now. But actually, what does the car class actually do? Very little. It actually relies entirely on the generic API transport. You can add to the car some other methods, right? But all the data is stored in the GAPI in this object here. So this is what delegate means, a delegation of work. I delegate a task to someone else to do, right? So for example, I don't know if you've ever heard this, that, you know, a good manager is someone who knows how to delegate. Have you ever heard that statement?
Not really actually, but I do get what you mean by it.
So, you know,
delegation.
manager of a system, right? And I end up trying to do everything myself, I'm wasting my time. If I'm a good manager, I would pass that responsibility on to someone else who can do it. That's the concept at the heart of this approach, right? So that's approach number one. You can add extra methods here and so on and so forth. It's very powerful because actually look how easy it is for me to create my own custom car. I don't really have to do much more than just pass lot of the work. All the member variables are going to be stored and looked after the generic API by this delegate class. And I'm just interacting with it. I'm creating a little layer between this and the person using it. That's method one. Method two, let's create another class, is, and let's call this car X, okay, just for change and to make sure that this is different. This mechanism is going to be using inheritance. And the way that you do it here is you use the extend keyword. He says getting it wrong. And what are you extending? You are taking that class and you are extending it. I think it's extends, isn't it? No, what's wrong with this? There's no default. Oh, no. Okay, I need to build a constructor. It's right. Don't worry about that at the moment. It always complains. And I always sit there thinking, why is it complaining, until I look at the error message. Now, what's the difference? What have I done that's different here to what I'm doing? Because we need to work this out. Well, this version may even be better than the other version. Let's have a look how we'll repeat the same thing, right? So in our car, we wanted to be able to set fuel and fuel capacity, didn't we?
Yep.
Now, for car X, if I grab that, let's go back and do how we did it before. We'll grab this, right? Ooh, whoops, stop doing that. There we go. Let's grab that, just to speed the coding up, right? And just for the sake of argument, I'm going to put that in there and call that car X, right? That's the first thing to do. It's saying there's no default constructor available in generic API default, blah, 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 blah. So what we have here is that I basically repeated the whole content of it, but here's the thing. I don't want that, as I didn't want before, and I don't want that, right? So we're trying to use it in exactly the same way. So I've got those two. Ignore the red lines for the time being, because we've got to tidy this up. Now, when we did the car, we created the whole object and passed all of that to it, right? To an object of this generic transport delegate. With this method, we're interacting with a class, generic API transport class. Inside our constructor, we call the constructor of this class here, and we pass it all this information. So this is what we do that's different. Super, because we're inheriting from it, and the easiest way, because I've got it over here, just grab that, speed it up a bit. Okay, give me a sec, go to here, right.
So you're talking about inheritance as well. The inheritance we're using protected instead of private. They just work the same in the same way, but it's just that when it comes to inheritance, you'll be using protected instead, right?
Yeah. So if you have a protected member variable, It means that the class that's inheriting, i.e. here in car X, gets direct access to the member variables. If it's private, I can't see them. And so what I then do is use the get set method. So have a look at that. That's my constructor. So let's compare constructors for a start, okay? Should start tidying up in a second and complaining less in a minute. Oh, hang on, what's wrong? No, I left out some of that. Right, in the car, I had to create the object of that member variable. I had to say that's the member variable, and then I'm going to use it. In this one, I extended the class. So car X is a class extending another class. It's like stretching it. It's like adding to it, right? Or interacting with it. But have a look at that. That's not that much different, right? But let's say that I want to use, let's go to our test, right? I haven't got any set get methods. Here, I had to, because I'm wrapping the other class, the object, I had to define these functions to wrap these, because they're invisible to the client, right? Let's come back here. So in my car, which is a delegate, right? If I do C dot, I can get the fuel, set the fuel, do all that, right? There are 4 of them visible to me because I created them inside here. But if I'm looking at car X, and let's compare them side by side, let's go to the main again. Right, so if I just do, for the sake of argument, system.out.print line, and then I just say C, and I say get fuel, right? Nice and simple method. So that is using delegation. That's how it would look so far. But what happens if it's with inheritance? So we've got car X, I've got my caps down. Car X, right? And I'm going to call it C, let's say C E X. No, I'm going to say C underscore X, right? Just to distinguish them. I'm going to create a new car X object. If I can type, if ever I learn to type when I'm talking, that would be great. And I've got to work out, oh, I've got 2 pieces of information like before. So let's do 23,45. So from a constructor point of view, it looks almost identical, right?
Yep.
The constructor here is behaving in a very similar way. Some very interesting things happen with inheritance, right? Let's go back to my main. You know, it's funny, doing this video, I've often in the past wondered how I could explain this to students. And now that I've bothered to do it because, you know, I've seen that it might help you, it might make things clearer. Right, now have a look at this. I haven't got any in this inheritance. I've got no private member variables. Because I'm extending the class, every method in there, all of these public ones, are now available to me without me having to write any more code. Look at that. All of it. That is a massively, massively powerful technique. Right, so let's just get, what was it? Let's get fuel. Right, so let's copy that line and just make a change to it. So no longer C, let's do C underscore X, and I can use the get fuel straight from the delegate class. Right, I don't have to create a wrapper in my local class, my car class. So suddenly you notice there are really interesting differences and benefits from each way. So here's a thought, okay, and it's a good point to stop because I think I have another student in a minute, and I will stop the recording and save it as well, and then start the session again. So Brian, there are these 2 different mechanisms, and if Tom is still here as well, there are these 2 different mechanisms, 2 different approaches to using it. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Okay, the obvious advantage with this one is that it's visible. You know, there's your object. You're actually creating an object inside your wrapper class and you are directly interfacing with that object. So you are outside the class. The class sits there in a world of its own. You never interfere with it. You never need to change it. You just send stuff to it and you interact with it, okay? So this is almost like an external relationship to that API transport. The inheritance goes inside the class and adds this as if invisibly, by using this word extends, invisibly car X is invisibly, all of generic APA transport delegate class is invisibly on the same page in front of you, but it's just hidden from view. So this X is a class that extends another class. It doesn't touch objects. The difficulty here is that this mechanism of extending is sometimes really difficult to make sense of, whereas more people I know in programming life use this mechanism because the concept of an API is the critical element here. The interface to this object, which are all these get fields, gets, all this stuff, that creates an interface for any other class that wants to work with it, whether it's a client, whether it's in JavaScript, whether it's in a mobile app, whether it's in any other platform. You can create the object from the original class inside itself and then interface with it. So this is the kind of mechanism you would use if you were doing a web program. So you might not want to build a car class. You might want to build something in JavaScript or JSON or whatever, and that would replicate this type of behavior. This needs you to work more or less within the same platform because it's extending a Java class. Now you can extend into different languages, but not generally, not that much. So this has other restrictions. It's incredibly useful. It's used all over the place. Both are used, but they're different. Okay, I'm going to stop, Brian.
All right.
What I can do is I'm going to stop because I want to save that recording and I'll upload that recording for you. I have a student coming in a few minutes. I want to go have a quick comfort break and then I'll log back in.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. And then we can talk. And then the other student who comes along, you might want to stay if you want to, and stop the recording.